Welcome to Season 5 of She Ventures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. She Ventures is a podcast about women and their work and life pivots. I believe in the power of storytelling. I also believe that if you change one woman's life, you start to change a family or a community. Our mission is to elevate the diverse stories of everyday women in their worth. One promise, no mansplaining ever. Sit back, listen, and hit subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at sheventurespodcast.com. The next time you feel like life has treated you unfairly, I invite you to think about the accomplishments of today's guest. Born to a teenage drug-addicted mother who abandoned her when she was 5, at 13, this woman started to follow in her mother's footsteps, doing drugs herself, dropping out of high school, and becoming a welfare-dependent teenage mom. How did she turn her life around from this to advising a president and becoming CEO with a consulting firm of more than 100 employees? Here to tell us about her journey is Rebecca Contreras. Rebecca, welcome to She Ventures.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with your listeners and just thrilled to be able to tell my story.
And your story is quite a story. Can you give listeners a little bit of a glimpse into how you grew up?
I'm probably not unlike most Americans, had a lot of issues in our family and a lot of dysfunction that existed. And it's amazing to me as I travel the country and tell my story, how many people have grown up with pain, trauma, hurt, and just, deal every day with it. And so I'm a border town gal. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, one of 4 children. My mother was a lot of issues with drug addiction and mental illness and dysfunction. And she grew up fatherless, and her entire identity was lost in her childhood, and which started her on a path for self-destruction. And then she has these kids. All of us did not know our fathers. Outside of my twin brother and I, we all had different fathers. And, I always joke with people, my sister's father was African-American, my father was white, and my brother's father was Mexican. And we just needed the Asian to complete the circle of diversity in our family. And my mother, in all honesty, tried really hard, but she just had a lot of trauma in her life. And I started at a very young age with a lot of abuse, and I tell my full story in Lost Girl, my new book. The first 3 chapters are dedicated to that. And the reason I do that is not to shame my family, but really to just unveil that, stuff happens in life, and usually it's not any of your own fault, and mostly, stuff happens to you. And at some point in your journey, when you become an adult, you have to become the driver of your own future. And unfortunately, as a teenager and young adult, got involved in a lot of mess. And when you grow up in abject poverty on a welfare system with the emotional lack, the physical lack, the spiritual lack, in every way poverty, it does not set you up for success. And so dropped out of school and ended up pregnant myself at age 17. And it wasn't until my daughter was probably about a year old that I had an aha moment and decided, my life just isn't where I want it to go. And here I am, I'm 19 years old, and my life's a mess. I don't have 2 pennies to rub together. And I actually entered a welfare to work program for a woman here in Texas by the name of Ann Richards.
Yes, I know Ann Richards.
Yeah,
I don't personally know her, but I remember her. She was quite a woman.
She was a feisty woman, and she's the first woman in power that I saw in that welfare to work program. And I actually became her receptionist and got to see her in action. And really, it gave me a vision for my life. And, it's so important as women to have these people we look up to, and especially younger women that can have people that they look up to when they're in their own mess. And so Ann did that for me and started my government career in that way.
It's funny. You actually went through my first 3 questions without me having to ask. So what I was going to ask, was there a specific catalyst outside of Ann Richards? Because in your book, I believe it was, or it was in an article, you're quoted as saying about your time with Ann Richards, when I worked for Ann, I saw a woman in power for the first time in my life. I realized I don't have to be strung out. I can actually do something with my life. What I was wondering is, was that the catalyst for you to say enough is enough? Because to your point, when you live through trauma and what you see is what you know, and it tends to be what you repeat, Why was your story different? What happened?
Well, I think there were several catalysts in my life. I would say those early years, really the first 10 years of my young adult life, there were a lot of sort of aha moments, catalysts. And most of it was just getting sick and tired of being sick and tired and not having anything. And my mom, who did come out of drug addiction and rehabilitated herself, took my daughter away from me. And losing my daughter was a catalyst. And not having her know me and having my mom raise her was a catalyst. And I tell the full story in chapter 3. I had her father, which was my baby daddy, drug dealer guy that almost killed me. He got thrown in prison. And that was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? This guy's in prison. And it was a good thing because he was an abuser, but I didn't know at the time. It's like when you have no value in yourself, you don't know what you are missing, and you're treated like crap. And you wonder, is this the way I'm supposed to be treated as a woman? You just don't know.
It's so true. And I just want to also underscore the fact that a lot of this happened in the 70s. It happened to me as well. And people didn't call child protective services. That was just not something that people did. And so I really applaud you for writing your book, Lost Girl, because it destigmatizes and shows how you can come from this situation and still do something with your life. Because the other piece of it that I see often is, and understandably, women get very angry, and they're angry with their abusers. They feel life has been unjust to them. And all of that may be true. I had to reckon with that myself, but it still doesn't change that you're right. You have to ultimately be in charge of your own life.
Well, and anger and defiance and protest, all of that can be healthy for change, but internally for me, it was not healthy. It made me bitter, angry. It made me hang on to my own past. And I had to let that go, learn to forgive and love and embrace. And guess what? Trust other people. I got mentors around me very young in my age that said, Rebecca, you're on a highway crash. Why don't you get on a different path? There's a purpose in your life. You actually are smart. First time I heard I was smart, I was 20 years old. I'm smart, really? And, having those mentors around you, went back to school, getting some knowledge and knowledge is power, getting some education, understanding that you have a purpose and you actually can learn. So I struggled a lot with my identity, but I also had a lot of mental trauma. So I had a learning challenge and disability. I couldn't learn. I couldn't absorb content. I had to force myself to change that and actually move in the trajectory of acquiring knowledge, whether it was reading books or taking courses, developing myself professionally as a woman. Because I had my second leader boss was a woman by the name of Kay Bailey Hutchison, who became U.S. Senator. Kay was a powerhouse too. So here are these two women on polar opposite sides of political aisle, but they actually believed in me. And then, of course, my third boss was George W. Bush, who was governor, became president. And so it's so important to have people and leaders around you that believe in you and believe in your potential, even when you don't believe in yourself.
You earned your GED, and we talked about Ann Richards. You mentioned Kay Bailey Hutchinson being different parts of the political spectrum, but supporting you nonetheless. And I wondered if there are any tips or resources that you would want to give to any young women or women in general that are in a similar situation that you found yourself in.
Well, I think it's important to pursue and seek knowledge and also ensure that you're surrounding yourself with the right relationships and the right people that will help you in that catalyst for change. I think oftentimes we kind of stay in our own circle, what's comfortable. It may not be healthy for us. I had to get away and get out of the environmental factors and people that were toxic in my life. And that meant starting over. And sometimes starting over is so hard, especially as women. We get really comfortable. Even if we're in a mess, we're comfortable there. It may not feel good, but it feels familiar. And I think having the grit and embracing that change and getting around different people, but also pursuing knowledge. I don't have a traditional college degree, but I had a lot of development through the LBJ School of Public Affairs here in Austin. I went and took classes on communication, on how to dress for success, writing courses, just things that could develop me so that I would project myself in a more professional way. I grew up in the hood. I'm from the East Side. And, there are things that come with that image-wise. I had to change my image. I think it's important to own your own power and own your own change. regardless of what's been handed down to you. And I think that's my biggest message in my story of transformation is own your power and own your change.
I love the fact because it reminds me of my own father who came to this country from Italy after the Second World War and was a very successful entrepreneur, but didn't have more than a high school education, yet educated himself continuously through his life in different means. And I think what's interesting also about your story is you next pivoted to advising President George Bush and you went into HR. You did a lot of things. And how did that pivot happen, by the way?
Well, actually, one of my early mentors when I worked for Kay, she mentored me in my life, in my young marriage, as a mom, as a wife. My mother was not married. My grandmother was not married. We didn't have fathers in our life. And here I was with this new husband, didn't know how to behave, didn't know how to have a healthy marriage. And so she mentored me, but she was also my boss when Kay was in office. And she actually called me one day in January of 1995 and she said, "Hey, guess who I'm working for? I'm working for the new governor. Come and be my deputy." And so I moved over to the Capitol to work for a woman by the name of Donna Reynolds. I tell her story fully in the book. And just what an amazing person she was in really mentoring me in HR. She was kind of the HR guru for Texas. And I learned as much as I could from her. She sent me to a lot of coursework, ended up going to the governor's executive development program to learn how to be a senior manager. But it was under Donna, that one woman that really invested in me and taught me all things HR. And she actually is the one that ended up recommending me to the governor. She left her directorship and said, "Hey, I'm going to recommend you to Governor Bush to be the director of HR." And I about fell over in my seat and could not believe that I was going to be the director of HR. And of course, the rest is history with that. But it did take a lot of hard work.
I can imagine. Did you interview with the former president?
No, I didn't. So I have to be honest, Doria. I had one interview my entire career. That was that welfare to work receptionist interview where I got in the door working for Ann Richards as a receptionist. And I haven't really had to interview for jobs in my whole career. I've had a network and have built. And that's the other thing I want to say. Your network matters. Listen, I am not the smartest person in the room. I certainly am not. I don't have the formal education, but my network is vast. And my network has been a stepping stone to my future in every sense of the word. It's why I'm a business owner today. I leveraged my network to build my business. Your network will make or break you as an entrepreneur and as a career woman. That network really served me well. I do want to briefly say I recently received a letter from President Bush. He actually read my book and sent me a personal note. And he communicated how impacted he was by my story and said, "I knew you had been through trauma, but didn't realize the depth of your pain. And I'm proud to have served with you." And of course, here I am reading a letter from an ex-president. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, you're proud to have served with me. I'm proud to have served with you. Just so many amazing people that I met in my government career have really helped establish my entrepreneur network today.
What I'm hearing, if I can reflect back to you, I'm hearing mentorship, networking are crucial, that you had your first interview very early on, and then it was really through hustle and getting to know people and chasing down opportunities and being willing to learn and show up. And also, I think there is an element of meeting the right people, and that sometimes is happenstance. I mean, there is just a teeny bit of element of the unknown, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And even putting yourself in a position to be in the right place at the right time, right? So positional power is so important. It matters where you go and where you meet and who you go and hang out with. It matters where you walk. But I also want to just encourage your listeners, people will read my story and think, "Oh my gosh, that's like a once in a lifetime story. That stuff just can't ever happen to me." I challenge you to say, maybe you don't walk the journey I walked, but I bet you what happened to me and the elements of climbing the ladder and having that grit and developing that entrepreneurial spirit or getting ahead in your career, all of those things can happen to you. Again, it takes the right steps and the right elements to be successful. And I'm thrilled that I've lived the adventure that I've lived.
I would say that there's very little good that can be said about trauma, but I will say that it does, at least for me, has made me very driven and also, has some dysfunctional elements to it, but it has helped me in my own career. So I do like that idea of kind of embracing the positive of it while you kind of put to rest and forgive what you need to, because you really ultimately are only hurting yourself if you are in a lot of pain. I wanted to ask, are there any misconceptions about the former president that you want to address at all?
Listen, I spent 12 years with Governor Bush, then President Bush. He is has been an amazing leader and former boss to me. The people that I met in the Bush administration, one of my top mentors is a man by the name of Clay Johnson, who's the president's best friend from high school and Yale. And he was a big catalyst in my life too. I don't have anything negative to say about President Bush. I can tell you that it's really easy to criticize any president in office. And we're seeing what's happening now with the critical way in which people are looking the presidency. And, until you sit in that seat behind that Oval Office desk and you have to grapple with the decisions of the world, you just don't know what you don't know. And so I always respect every president in office, and I pray for our president in office. And I always encourage people, don't be so quick to judge. Yes, mobilize, yes, affect change by voting, but understand that they are faced and grapple with the burdens of the world, not just America, because we're a leader in the world. And it's not easy for me to criticize a president because I've seen it from the inside, and I know the tremendous stories and issues that they grapple with. I tell the 911 story in my book in detail about my time in the Oval with him. And nobody knows what they don't know until everything hits the fan. And you have to make those tough decisions. So Bush was a leader of resolve. I have developed my own leadership style with that resolve and grit. Nothing tears me down and sets me back without me getting back up, dusting myself off and moving forward. So that's what I have to say about that.
How did you pivot then from government work to becoming the CEO of your current consultancy, Avant Garde?
When I left the White House, I was asked to serve on the board of West Point. President Bush appointed me to West Point. And so I had my stint there at West Point, met some amazing people. I started consulting in addition to serving on the board of West Point, and cut my teeth in consulting and worked for another firm. And Doria, I did that for 6 years, and I made the other firm a lot of money. And I realized that 90% of the business that was coming into the firm was my network. My mentor sat me down and said, Rebecca, you know what you're doing for that man and making him rich, you could do for yourself by starting your own consulting business. And I was like, I guess I can do that. Had never started a business, have zero business background, went and got the tools that I needed, business one-on-one, took some courses virtual courses, and just began to surround myself with business mentors, people that have started a business, and launched it in April 2011. Today, we are 110 plus strong across 9 states, and it will hit 20 million. And it's just all through organic growth, Doria. It's through hiring good people smarter than me, and then empowering them to do what they do best, and just providing that vision and leadership. And that's what Avant Garde does. We are a people process strategy firm, and we solve people problems. And so we know we'll be in business for a long time because there are a lot of people problems
that is
around.
For sure. Oh, that is for sure. So you started it, and I wasn't sure about. You started it from the ground up.
We did, yeah. So I'm a majority owner. My partner, who's an IT guy, he owns 49%, and he kind of is the sort of systems platform. We're both patent owners of an agile system that he developed, but I'm on the patent as well because we did the strategic work together. But we solve problems, and we also deploy an agile platform that does workforce predictive analytics. And so I'm the driver in the face of the company with a network, and also lead the team. But he plays a strategic role, does all the behind the scenes stuff that I don't ever want to do. I don't want to get involved in QuickBooks and payroll and all that stuff. That doesn't excite me. I do want to say, if you form a business, if you go into business, make sure you're teamed with the right partner that complements your skill sets. You guys are in sync with what roles you're playing and where you complement each other and who does what. But we actually just this month got recognized for 2 Stevie National American Business Awards that we've won this month. We're really proud of that. Business of the Year and Woman Entrepreneur of the Year. So, a lot of success that we're very, very proud of. And I give all the kudos to my amazing team who just makes me look good as a CEO, which I love.
That's wonderful. And congratulations on that. That must be really a moment of feeling a lot of pride for yourself and your team. What would you say a typical day looks like for you as CEO?
I'm straddling a lot. I am a mom of 2 amazing adult kids and 1 adopted niece. And grandbabies and the wife of 32 years and CEO. We also have a nonprofit. We do a lot of philanthropic work here in Austin with inner city kids. I grew up in the inner city, so my husband and I's heart is there. And then I have this book launch that I did that I'm in the middle of, a book tour. But life for me is very chaotic. It's very busy, but I'm very structured and organized. There's nothing that happens outside of the calendar. For us right now, it's our busiest time. We just launched fiscal year 23. The federal government just began its new fiscal year. So it is back to back. I do, though, in between that back to back schedule is I make sure there's a lot of self-care and self-love of myself. I think that I'm only going to be as good as my investment in me. I always tell women, nobody's going to love you like you love you. And loving you means taking care of you. So making sure that those healthy habits are incorporated.
I think that as women, we internalize in some way taking care of ourselves is somehow selfish, right? That's the message that unfortunately many of us get. Yet, if we're not okay, everyone around us is not okay. And so I really applaud you for, so what does that look like for you? What does self-care look like?
Well, I start my this morning up at 6:45. I have my time of meditation and quiet time of journaling and making sure I'm centering my mind around the things that are important to me, which is my prayer time, my meditation time, the time of reflection, what's going on in my life today? What's my day look like? And how can I get really calibrated emotionally around the chaos that I know is going to happen? We've had a lot of chaotic things hit recently. With growth, you just have chaos. But making sure that I have those quiet moments. So I do that every morning, Doria. I do not miss that. When I miss that reflection time and that quiet time, my day feels a little more mumbled and jumbled and chaotic. I work out 5 days a week. I have to. I'm 53 years old. I'm not getting any younger. I go out and walk. I do. For me, it's Orange Theory. Try to do a little strength, a little cardio. And then I spend time. My favorite thing is spending time with our grandbabies. They bring me lots of joy. I'll call my daughter or son-in-law, who both work for me, by the way, and say, hey, I want to come and see the kids, have some nana time. And just through their little eyes, there's hope. When the world is chaotic, I look in their eyes and I just see so much hope. And those are the things that make me happy. Spending time with my husband. We have what we call a religious Friday night date night, where we take time for ourselves. All those things are so important to self-care and self-love.
Yes, absolutely. And I take it that religion has played a big role in your life.
Oh, it's monumental in my life. I think faith, in a world where people have lost faith and hope, I think faith is so important, and the role that faith can play in your journey of encouragement. I believe there's a God and a higher power. And, sometimes when I can't, I sit and reflect and think about how he can. And he created the world, and everything that's going on in my life must have a purpose. And faith is so important. And I find as I talk to people all over the country, a lot of people really have pressed into that notion because there is so much hopelessness, especially we've seen the last 2 years of so much tragedy and death and trauma. And, you've got to have something to hang on to. For me, faith is a monumental, critical success factor, I call it, in my own journey. It's so important.
Wonderful. And for women who are trying to navigate their careers, particularly those in male-dominated fields, what advice or tips would you give them?
Well, I can tell you, don't shrink back in any position, in any way. I do have a little bit of a different approach in how I position myself for taking that, what I call positional power and place at the table. And I do it through leadership and servant leadership. I believe that women, we can march and we can protest and we can scream and holler that we want a seat at the table. But the way I have gotten my seat at the table is by bringing something to the table that adds value. So by doing my work and by showing myself as an expert and by bringing solutions, I have earned a seat at the table. So let's earn that seat at the table. It's time. We live in an exciting time where women are the fastest growing demographic in terms of the economic growth and the contributor to the economic engine. We're the fastest growing businesses. We're not where we need to be yet, but we're certainly not where we were 30 years ago. I'm a really big leader in servant leadership to really earn that seat at the table, to have your voice be heard. And I tell a story in my book, which your readers can read. When you do get bullied by that person, that's usually going to be a man, by the way, just don't shrink back, but also don't engage in negative, toxic fighting. Just really be the one to take that positional power to rise above that conflict and lead in a different kind of way. Even if you need to get yourself in a private area and get your thoughts centered so that you don't respond in anger, again, put yourself forward in the best light so that no one can ever come back and say, well, geez, she's kind of a piece to work with. She's a little much, but you're leading from that servant leadership positional power point.
I don't know if I'm playing devil's advocate, but I listen to my Gen Z daughters a lot, and they talk about how they have been taught in school that they are privileged just by nature of the fact that they're white, that people of color deserve to be not necessarily put ahead of them, but that there has to be some kind of equalization that hasn't occurred in their minds. What do you say to that? That if someone said to you, you have privilege that others haven't had, so it was easier for you?
Right. So I have never used my Latina Hispanic card in my career ever. As a matter of fact, I don't like it when people introduce me as the first Hispanic, whatever, first Hispanic, surrogate to the president, first Hispanic, I don't like that. I am a woman and a leader before I'm a Hispanic, and I'm a doer and a results-driven person before I am a Hispanic. I would just say, and I'm all about diversity, by the way. I led President Bush's recruitment diversity initiatives to get more people of color, women, and minorities into his administration. And we broke records in a lot of big ways in the appointments that we made. But I tell people that feel that, maybe it's time for me to step aside. You need to walk in your own conviction and in your own thought process of why you feel that way. But don't let it be from a position of insecurity or of guilt. Let it be from a position of it's the right thing because it's the right thing for you. That's the way you feel. But I have never been one to lead with my Hispanic label. Has the fact that I'm a Hispanic helped me? I don't know. I can tell you I'm results driven. I'm outcome driven. I'm smart. I mobilize people, and I've been able to acquire knowledge that I believe makes me a leader in my community, in the business community. And the fact that I'm Hispanic is nice, but it's not what I lead with.
I'm speechless because there's really very little I can say to that. You exactly represent what you say. Your rise has been meteoric, and we're just wrapping up here. To what do you attribute both your personal and your professional success?
I attribute it to I've never done it alone. I'm not a prima donna. I believe that we need a community and we need a tribe and we need people around us to help us succeed. I have a whole community around me of businesswomen and leaders and mentors and a supportive husband and children and family. And I'm not alone, and I've never been alone. I've never done anything by myself and put that stake in the ground to say, I did it because I'm so smart. I have that community around me. And I've also learned to believe in myself through the trauma and through the pain and not allow anything to derail me from my purpose. It's that, again, that grit leadership and that resolve leadership that does not allow when you fall down. I call it a fail forward strategy. John Maxwell has a great book on failing forward. I've learned to fail forward and take the pain that I've had in my life and use it for good purpose. Dory, I have a series that I launched on my website called Pain on Purpose. And that means that pain's going to happen, but what are you going to do in the purpose around the pain? Those are the things I think that have helped Rebecca be successful.
Wonderful. And I want to, Rebecca, firstly, thank you for your time. And could you tell our listeners where they can find out about Lost Girl, about your business, and anything else that you recommend?
Yeah, so I would encourage you to connect with me on RebeccaContreras.com and subscribe to our mail list. We have some tools and tips that we share. All the resources are free. If they want to learn more about my company, Avant Garde, there's a link from my RebeccaContreras.com page to my company, Avant Garde. Just connect with me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram at Rebecca Ann Contreras with the middle name Ann. But I'd love to hear from you. And I do hope that everybody takes a little bit of my story and uses it to just think about what pivot you need to make in life and where those transformational moments can happen in your own journey. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to She Ventures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.